Hi, I am Aleph. Today's argument is simple. 1. Quantitatively infinite amounts of information cannot exist. 2. If God is omniscient, then God's knowledge must be comprised of a quantitatively infinite amount of information. 3. Therefore, God cannot be omniscient. We do not need to say much about the first premise because most theists already agree that actually infinite amounts cannot exist. I will let William Lane Craig explain.
Mathematicians recognize that the existence of an actually infinite number of things leads to self-contradictions. For example, what is infinity minus infinity? Well, mathematically, you get self-contradictory answers. This shows that infinity is just an idea in your mind, not something that exists in reality. David Hilbert, perhaps the greatest mathematician of the 20th century, wrote, "The infinite is nowhere to be found in reality. It neither exists in nature nor provides a legitimate basis for rational thought. The role that remains for the infinite to play is solely that of an idea."
Consider then my second premise that if God is omniscient, then God's knowledge must be comprised of a quantitatively infinite amount of information. Here is Craig's response to this.
Okay, so the second objection that this raises and why it's important is that you can ask the question, if an actually infinite number of things or number of events or something like that is impossible to be real, in the sense that we're using the term real, does God not count as an actual infinite?
Theists have typically, well, not typically, universally held that God is not composed of parts.
Yeah.
God is not an aggregate of definite and discrete elements that make up a collection, and therefore the notion of God's infinity is not a mathematical notion. It's not a quantitative notion. It's a qualitative notion. It means things like God is perfectly holy, omniscient, omnipotent, timeless, spaceless, and so forth. All of those sort of qualitative attributes go to make up God's infinity, but the infinity of God is not a quantitative concept.
Craig initially misses the point. The objection is not that God is an aggregate of infinite definite and discrete elements. God could be made up of a single, indivisible part, but if that part can be in an infinite number of states, God could still hold an infinite amount of information. He then says that omniscience is not a quantitative trait, it is a qualitative trait. Here I just need to suggest that William Lane Craig does a lot more research in information theory. Information is a quantitative measure, and insofar as omniscience is a related the knowing of any kind of information, then omniscience is a quantitative concept, not a qualitative one. Craig responds to this in his question and answer section by saying this. The mode of God's knowledge has traditionally been taken to be non-propositional in nature. God has a single undivided intuition of reality, which we finite knowers break up into individual bits of information called propositions. Thus, the number of propositions is at best potentially infinite. Again, Craig does not understand information theory. The information content of an object is not in the number of discrete parts that comprise it, but in the number of states the object can be in. So God could have an undivided intuition of reality, but all that would mean is that God is in a state that encodes reality, and to encode all the information in reality, the potential number of states God could be in must be enormous, if not infinite. In fact, I would argue it would have to be infinite. Craig says that the number of propositions is potentially infinite. I disagree. Consider the propositions of the form a plus b equals c. Since allegedly there are an actually infinite number of integers, then there must be an actually infinite number of propositions of this form, and God must know all of them. Each of them takes up a number of bits of information. Hence, if God knows everything, he must contain an actually infinite amount of information. So he cannot know everything. Notice how the laws of information theory follow logically and necessarily from the very laws of deductive logic that Craig uses to formulate his arguments. So if he wants to affirm the necessity of the laws of deductive logic, he is obliged on pain of irrationality to affirm the laws of information theory and that God is bound by them. I hope you enjoyed the video. Remember to like, share and subscribe, and donate crypto so I can keep making videos like this.